This movie is unbelievably, incredibly, undeniably boring as hell. I'm probably one of the few people out there who actually likes the Da Vinci Code movie. Don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect movie by any means, and there are certain things about it that are entirely not as interesting as it could be, but what made me very interested about that movie was its subject matter. See, this was a story that had introduced me to the idea of Jesus and Mary Magdalene having been a couple. And I know that there was another book about that published 21 years prior to the Da Vinci Code, and it's probably much more scientifically accurate and interesting, but the Da Vinci Code arguably repopularized that idea and arguably made it a lot more interesting with a fun treasure hunt story. Also, just as a movie as a whole, Ron Howard's direction and Tom Hanks' performance and all the supporting cast actually do a pretty good job here, despite it being, understandably, a less than stellar drama. Whatever else can be said about the movie or the subject matter, because this was the movie that introduced me to the thing that I'm very interested in, I do enjoy the movie. I even enjoy the extended version, which is something I don't usually say very often, and normally for very good reason. It's literally nothing but 30 extra minutes of pain. So naturally, because I enjoyed Da Vinci Code so much, I was kind of looking forward to Angels and Demons. Granted, its particular subject matter wasn't as interesting to me as, say, Jesus and Mary having had a kid, but it was still kind of fascinating. Unfortunately, the movie itself wasn't. Maybe it has something to do with the subject matter not being as fascinating to me, or maybe it has something to do with no one in the movie seeming to be all that interested in making it. But for whatever reason, Angels and Demons was a complete flop. However, I was willing to overlook that if the next one they were going to do, assuming they were going to, was going to be any good. But given the failure that Angels and Demons was, it didn't seem very likely. And now we have the third Dan Brown film directed by Ron Howard starring Tom Hanks, and it really needs to stop at this point. I'll give Inferno this much. Tom Hanks, as usual, does a really good job despite the lackluster material. If he knew he was acting in a bad movie, he never lets it show, as he never does. Plus, I said this before earlier this year, and I think I'm gonna have to say it again. Ron Howard seems to be losing his edge. This is yet another movie that tries to make the audience sympathize with the end of the world without having anything more interesting and relatable. I mean, yes, we all live on this world and we don't want it to be destroyed just yet. But that's not enough to make you invested in a story about it. Speaking of story, this film story follows Robert Langdon, once again played by the great Tom Hanks, who wakes up in a hospital suffering from head trauma and amnesia. Gee, I wonder where I've seen that before. Anyway, after a failed assassination attempt, a young nurse, played by Felicity Jones, decides to help Robert Langdon in his quest to figure out what happened to him. Upon further investigation, he discovers that a madman, bent on saving the world from overpopulation, has created a virus that will cause more casualties than the Black Plague, and has left clues as to its whereabouts within the mythology of Dante's Inferno. Now, Robert Langdon and this surprisingly cooperative nurse have to journey all across the world to find it and stop it from plaguing the entire world. Now, that is the plot of the movie, which is totally fine. It's serviceable, it has high stakes, and it can really create some neat moments. The problem is, that's all there is. And what I mean by that is the movie has a plot, but prior to what I said at the beginning of my description, it's not really a story. I may have mentioned in a couple of my other reviews that the big stakes, as in the end of the world, don't matter in a story unless there are smaller personal stakes to make you emotionally invested. You don't watch WALL-E to watch him save the Earth. You watch WALL-E because you want to see him survive. You care about him. You may even love him. You want to see him hook up with Eva at the end. That's the emotional connection to the overall plot. It's non-existent in this movie. And it's really a shame because there are plenty of things about this film that are actually okay. The special effects are pretty good, the locale shots of Florence and Venice are really nice to look at, and the overall puzzle idea is something that I still find interesting and cool to incorporate in any kind of story. But again, there's no strong reason to emotionally invest in this plot. But then of course the other big kicker for me was the obnoxiously ugly cinematography. For some reason, Ron Howard has fallen into the close-up, shaky cam, rapid-fire editing bullcrap that has been plaguing too many Hollywood movies. So yeah, I'm awfully sorry to say that Inferno is a massive disappointment. I do not recommend you see it. Do not waste your time or money. Ladies and gentlemen, I am TheNorm telling you what Hollywood doesn't want you to hear. Thank you for watching.